Well, debt crisis, sovereign debt crises are nothing new. I mean, I've been working on developing countries for 40 years now, and I've seen sovereign crisis after sovereign crisis. They're always caused by fiscal crises, which in turn are caused by politically determined entitlements which cannot be financed. And that is true of Europe, it's true of America, and it is true of Argentina, Brazil, you name all the other countries you normally associate with debt crises. But the trouble is, because Europe has got this single currency, this fixed currency, the standard way of dealing with a debt crisis like this, many third world countries had this in the 80s and 90s, was you had to restructure. They call it restructuring the debt, which really means that you have to take a haircut. Now, Merkel and Sarkozy want banks to take a haircut in Europe. The trouble is that will lead to another banking crisis, because a huge number of European banks which are holding Greek, Spanish, Irish debt. So if they take a crisis, that means their balance sheets again collapse and we're back again to square one. Okay, so they're saying, oh, well, what happened now will happen in 2013. But, you know, if you're holding this debt, if you now look at what's happening to the prices of the debt, people say, oh, we must get out of this as fast as possible. So it's not, that's not helping. The second problem is that you could always get out of this crisis if you have to deflate, which is what you have to do. You have got to cut back. What you don't want to do is to have an internal devaluation, which is what these countries have to do because they can't actually devalue their currency. So if you look at the old IMF programs in any developing country when they had similar sovereign debt crises, there are two things. They're restructuring. They took haircuts, I mean, very varied. Argentina, 60%, some other countries, 20%. And at the same time, they floated their currency. So that meant the adjustment took place without this huge, deep recession, which will now be caused in all these countries. So I think the future for the euro is grim. I mean, they can keep saying things, but the markets are making quite clear. And very soon, I think the euro is dead. What you're going to get is a small Deutschmark zone, which is what you had before the euro. I mean, Holland will still be part of it. Austria, I don't know, maybe some Denmark, I don't know, some northern European countries, and the rest will float. And in the meantime, there might be another banking crisis because all these European banks are holding this debt, will have to be bailed out again. So it's horrendous. Now in America, the subprime mortgage crisis, I think, is over. I think that is fine, but they still have this very deep fiscal deficit. And until they tackle that, there's no sign there, nothing is happening. Now they've got political gridlock. So in both these countries, the prospects are not very bright.
In contrary to Europe, the US government is spending a lot.
I mean, the simplest way to spend in a deep slump like that is you just cut taxes for everyone, households, firms, corporations. That immediately puts money in the hands of people. So even though they're trying to deleverage, reduce their debts, they can reduce their debts because their income after tax has gone up. So that goes towards savings and their spending remains the same. They didn't do that. They said we'll have these shovel-ready projects, you know, and you can't just you're building a bridge, you can't just say, you know, now this crisis is over, we're going to stop spending money on the bridge, so that makes no sense. So you cannot have public works as a form of counter-cyclical spending, and Keynes was quite clear on this, so they haven't read Keynes. The second thing is that they've got wrong is they don't realize that monetary policy is very important. I mean, the reason why Europe did quite well and America has done fairly well until this latest phase is what is called quantitative easing. I mean, the ECB loosened the money supply, and similarly the Americans did it. And that is very powerful because if you increase the money, it's got nothing to do with interest rates, liquidity traps, it's all rubbish. As long as you increase the money supply, which you can do, that will raise aggregate demand. So in fact, you should rely much more on monetary policy. And the British now are doing exactly the right thing. They're cutting back on their fiscal deficit, they're cutting back on spending, but they're going to keep monetary policy fairly loose. And the Americans are doing it, though I don't think they're right in this second quantitative easing, because now they have a problem that I think America has now avoided any danger of a deflation. So you're not going to have a double recession. The big worry is now that if the second bout of quantitative easing might lead to inflation, hyperinflation, and that is for worry.